Should have started this before I took it all apart and cleaned all of it. Guys, this is the JB440. This is, I want to title this video the original 1x4, but then there's going to be some little keyboard Nazi out there that's going to have to correct me. This is a 1-tube modulating 4-tube. This is a cute little driver unit, and I took it all apart and I've already figured out what's wrong with it. I'm coming into this a little late. I should have started from the very beginning where I took it out of the box, because this is a neat little piece of radio history. I like how they got a little signal meter up here. It's cute. This thing was a little dirty. Of course, this has been around since the 60s plus, and we're going to cover what happened here with this cute little guy. I've never seen one of these. I did a quick Google search on it, and I was very limited in the data that I was able to find on this particular amplifier. But I think this is a kick-ass little driver. So it's fairly clean for as old as it is. And when it showed up here, I mean, you can see there's a little dimple right here. But the whole deck of this thing was caved in, and it was doing like this nosedive. See, they built it out of this very, very thin metal. And you know, back in the day, people handled packages differently than we handle them now. They throw things like they're footballs, and like shit gets messed up all the time. But then in the day when this was made, this was something that you like kept in your closet and was kind of hand carried everywhere. So let's flip this thing over, and we'll get right into the crux of how this thing works. But I cleaned all the cigarette schmoo out of the tuner. I made it and oiled it. I degreased it and oiled it. And then I went through and I modified how I'm going to put some kind of support on that, because that's just hanging. That's just a small little board with little diodes in it that create enough voltage to run this meter. We got to get that supported. But the whole floor pan of this thing was bent. It was bent. And these transformers were touching, and they were leaning over when it got here, and I was managed to be able to get it bent out. And the main reason the guy sent it up here is because it was doing erratic wattage, it wasn't working properly, and it was something simple. But then the something simple, when I figured out what something simple is, and it's a very simple thing, I figured out what the cause and the effect is. So I like to think of things as if there's a cause, this is the effect. So then if I fix the cause, the effect goes away. I don't like magical stuff that's, oh, let's bend it this way and it starts working again. I can't live with that. If I send this all the way back across the country and this guy ends up having problems with this little guy again, one, he's never going to send me anything ever again to work on. And two, he's going to tell his buddies, man, I sent that thing out there to that guy. He kept it for like 3 months, and then when he finally got around, I got it back and it didn't work right. I don't like to think like that. So I've seen what the problem is, but I also seen what caused it. So on that note, let me flip this puppy over, and we'll get on to the bottom side of things. What are you doing? Hey, Diggy. What you doing? Hi. She's lost at the moment. That's my dog, but it's actually the kid's dog. The dog has gotten way close with the kid. And Mama and the kid are out of town this weekend at her mother's house doing stuff, and I am at home working. So I've got trouble. I got Trouble's sidekick over there. He's got a big kiddie swimming pool that he's had so he could be cool because he's all black in the heat. And what does this ass munch do today? You're a bad dog, yes you are. He ate a hole in the swimming pool today. Dug a hole through the edge of the swimming pool. Drained it. He's out there for 5 minutes by himself. Dug a hole through the swimming pool. Anyhow, Junior's been underneath foot all day. Okay, so this is the bottom side of this JB box. This little black cat. And I flipped it over, and one of the very first things that I made the observation on was this breaker. It's missing some pieces. Now it's currently in the operation state, but if it ever got tripped, there would be no way to reset it safely. So I start looking at it, and this is a 240 volt AC. Focus, you $1,000 camcorder. There you go, 240 volts. And here's the part number. Well, I went and I did the old Gargler search on it, and that part number crosses with a 2.4 amp, 3.4 amp, 6.5 amp, and a 10 amp breaker. Now, I already know what this thing's going to put out for power because I plugged it in and kind of got it working, but I understand why the owner sent it to me because it was very intermittent. It requires a 10 amp breaker. So this being actually physically smaller in length, so we marry that up to the cabinet, you'll see that this is actually physically shorter in length, is a little bit better install than what the stock one was. They had this just hanging in here and the legs of this were resting against this board. Well, once again, imagine this looking like the backside of a bowl or a very soft plate, just kind of in a hump in the middle. This breaker was touching this distribution bus. Well, when I put it back together, me being me, I want to make sure it never comes back here again. So I thought I'd do the dude some favors. Now, these are relatively stock caps. You can tell just by the look of them. Somebody's gone in here and replaced this cap. This is not stock. But it was rubbing right up against this lead on this distribution bar. It was also rubbing up against this lead, which is part of the high volt section. So I put some heat shrink on these to help protect the ground insulation on the jacket, which was just this little polymer plastic coat, PVC heat shrink printed plastic coat. So instead, because remember, the problems that we're having here is that this thing flexes, because, you know, let's face it, Black Cat did not build the most heavy-duty thing. That's like the SB220s I get in here. I took the time and I got a router out and I cut a hunk of wood so I can set it in the back corner of the cabinet and then hit it with a shot hammer, bink, and knock the cabinet back out, because they use very thin aluminum on the SB220s. And every single one of them that shows up over here, the transformer is just tilted on a little bit because it bends. Because they drop the boxes on shipping. They don't treat stuff the way they used to. So with this thing bending, we were having a power issue over here. Broken breaker, fix that. Well, the breaker's not technically broken, but we're not like on Apollo 11 there where we're trying to land on the moon and the end of the breaker pops out and we're going to hold the breaker in with a pen. True story, actually happened. So we don't want that. So I gave him a brand new 10 amp breaker. Well, not brand new, as in like used 10 amp breaker that came out of an SB220. Perfect amperage, right voltage. Who gives a shit? So I replaced the solid core wire that was coming off the back of the breaker. And by the way, when I run it earlier, what was making contact to this connection, which is the primary positive lead, not positive lead, but the primary 110 lead. Now this thing is wired 220, but only in single phase. So it's 110 to some of the 220 plug. It's what they call single phase 220 or 110. Anyhow, was only making physical contact. That's because the thing was bent. It's the only reason it was working. So I went ahead and I used a piece of stranded wire with heat shrink on it and resoldered the connection. This is the primary lead that goes up and runs the on-off switch in the front. And this takes off and runs everything else. So because this thing is bent, there was a lot of problems that have come from that. I've got to go in and I got to repair this wire. As you can see, it's connected, but if you look real close, the wires are floating inside the solder. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace this since it's all boogered up and it goes from here to here. And the other main reason, he goes, it was very intermittent in wattage. Well, let me explain to you why. If you look here, you can see the coat of the varnish is worn off on this coil. The reason it's worn off on that coil, this is the output. This is your driver tube, by the way. Here's your 4 final tubes. Instead of having a high voltage in the anode on top, believe it or not, they have the anode on the bottom. This is your high volt circuit. That this normally is what's on top of the tube, but the anode comes out on the bottom on those 6550s. Anywho, your driver tube, this is your tuning circuit, and this is your induction coil, and this is your output. Well, when the deck flexed, it turned this into a cold solder joint. So he said he'd sit there and he'd talk on it for a little bit and then he'd quit talking, or the wattage would jump all over the place and it sounded like it was popping on the other end. Well, this being in the middle of the bent deck, remember, it bent like a bowed down this direction, there's your problem. So I'm going to redo this solder joint and anything else I can find in this little corridor of love, and make it so that it can sit and flex a little bit. Now, how we overcome the bent deck portion of this amp is that we took, and I popped it back out, I bent it back, I took an aluminum pin and with a little bit of shot hammer, a little bit of wood, and knocked the floor back straight. Well, it's just going to bend it again in shipping going home. So we had to come up with another solution. These are 2 pieces of virgin Teflon that I cut out of a big block, drilled some holes in it, and these are actually a little bit taller. If we get down here and look, they're just a scooch taller than what this is front to back level. And the reason for that is I want to pre-bend the deck of this thing the other direction. So now what I'm going to do is the bottom tin of this box, the actual bottom shield that goes on here, believe it or not, is thicker than what the deck material is made out of. So I have these screwed. I've glued and I've screwed them, glued, screwed, and tattooed. Screwed these to the upper deck, and then when I put the lid on it, I'm going to add 2 new holes with some screws with some washers, and we're going to add these pins, and that's going to help stabilize this platform to help him get it home. I highly doubt this is going to go on to another owner. If it does, that's awesome, but things are getting to be the way they are now, to where there's not a, I don't think there's going to be another generation for us to kick this stuff onto, which makes me sad as hell, but it is what it is, and I can guarantee that it's going to make it home by fortifying this. This was the most bent point on the deck. It was bent, the highest portion of the hump down this direction was right here. So this is bent back flat. I bent the little gnarled corner out on here to help stabilize it, and there was another big bend that was up in here that we managed to able to just bloop, pop out. So I recognize that this portion of the deck is going to need the most support. This is in the middle of the deck, so it's going to cause the deck to flex the most with the tubes. If you can visualize the tubes, it's going to bend in this direction. So I want to try and create a stable platform for it. As I look around here, I see a lot of really questionable solder joints, but then again, it is what it is, right? So give me a couple minutes. We're going to get this cleaned up. God, these are bleeders out of an SP220. We're going to go through and we'll clean up some stuff like this. And that stuff right there. And I want to go over a soldering iron over these joints here because they're a little bit questionable. Maybe take a zip tie and zip tie that wire down. Probably zip tie this whole loom of wires together because I'd sure hate to put a case screw in here and have it either pinch this wire or wear a hole through the insulation. And then I want to label everything for the guy. I want to show him what everything does. Everybody thinks on these JBs that this is actually a drive knob. Well, that's how we turn the dead key up and down. Wrong. That's how you tune the input to the box. So when you want your dead key to go down, these guys, they'd sit there and they'd turn this knob, and well, actually what you're doing is if you look at it on a reflect meter going into the amplifier, you know, you got your dead key way up on your output wattage and your reflect's way down. So they all think, oh, well, we turn this knob and it's gonna lower my dead key down on my output watts. Wrong. What it's doing is changing the input aspect ratio, the input SWR, to where it's increasing and going way up so less wattage can get into the box, which is the wrong way to tune this thing. So you have your tune, your induction coil, and your load. So this is your driver input, tune. This is going to be your output for your driver, your plate and your load, or your tune and your load. That's what these two tuners are. I'm going to have them appropriately marked on the top side, even though I highly doubt you'll ever need to ever adjust this, since these two variables will probably never move again. But you can see where somebody's come in here and tried to make adjustments to the coil already to hop it up to get a little bit more watts out of it. The other thing I want to do is I want to replace these parasitics. This one is burnt pretty good. These have seen better days, so I'll probably get out some couple 100 ohm resistors and make some 50 ohm loads out of them, and with some mag wire we'll recreate these parasitics and we'll replace this, make this new, and get a little bit better suppression going on for the circuit. We'll fire it up and we'll see how it runs. I'll be back. What are you doing, dude?
What are you doing? Aye. Aye. Getting a drink from your bowl.
Alright. So, alright, so where are we at? Okay, so it just dawned on me what this little rubber nub is that everything is glued to. You can see this is like hot glued in. Instead of bending the deck back, somebody has gone in here and they put a little rubber stopper in this thing. Which if we look, get down here and look. You see this right here? Let's get down here and really look. Look at that. So look at this little nub that's right here. They made it with just barely enough room to clear. But then if we get down here and we look again, look at the height of the knob and the tuner and that coil. Okay, so I went in and I replaced the cheesy wire that was solid core. Replaced it with high temp Teflon wire. Redid all the solder joints that I wanted to hit. Like I said, I already covered and redid the breaker. And then I took a piece of Kapton, which is very, very low dielectric tape, which is basically made out of Mylar and some adhesive. But this is Kapton tape. This is like the duct tape of the high voltage world. Put that over the coil so I don't have to worry about that shorting anymore. Built new parasitic chokes out of some mag wire and just made it all happen, Captain. So honestly, I think that we're at the point now where we can go fire down on this. Also, I also took these leads and bent them at the end. Bent them over, cleaned the eyelets, sucked all the solder out, cleaned the eyelets out, put this back together, and made it so even if this thing does manage to bend or flex, which I highly doubt it will by me adding these 2 reinforcement bars to it, between here and on the way home, this coil won't be the cruxus of the problem anymore. So now the next step is to flip it over, put the tubes on it, let it warm up, and let's go to running it. Okay, I'll be back. Okay. Let's zoom out a little bit. So I'm sitting here. Focus. Hold on a second. Focus. Focus. There you go. I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the tubes. I ran this thing for a minute and I'm looking at the heat dissipation on the tubes. If we look at this, we got this fan, which I took apart and I cleaned, by the way. It was all encrusted and full of little nasties. Took it apart and cleaned it. The airflow comes out and it wraps around these 2 tubes. Okay, wraps around them and it jets out. So these 2 tubes don't get very much cooling. And as I was running it, I was noticing these tubes are getting warm. This little guy, I think this is neat, by the way. This whole thing here is neat. Little screens to help dissipate the field energy that's coming from these 4 tubes. They put the screen here to block the RF. So the RF that's getting generated by the little driver tube is not going to interfere with the actual amplification tubes. The other thing is that they recognize that somebody someplace was going to want to take this apart. And so they've got this so that this is held in place by a little tiny clip that's made by wire. You can take that little clip off. They just looped a piece of wire through here. You can take your fingernail here and stick it down in there and bend the wire off the clip. See that? And pull this apart if you wanted to. I got my fat fingers down in there, put the tube in place. But as I was standing here running it, I made the observation that this needle is way off for its signal ratio, and since it is coupled directly to the tuning capacitor, there's more than enough RF to drive this meter forward. And I'm like, remember it was laying down flat like this. And I was thinking I'd have to do something to support it. So sitting there thinking about it, I'm looking at it and I'm like, wait a minute, there's an adjustment right here. Oh, well, why would you have that hanging down inside a coil? And then it dawned on me, this is old double-sided stick tape. So instead of this thing flopping around loose, it's supposed to sit up and be supported like this. Just like that. Use the back of the meter to support the board. I started looking at the old glue that's holding this thing. This is being held in by a friggin' pubic hair, man. There's nothing holding this in place. So, as I'm waiting for the tubes to cool off here, because now I'm going to put some goo in there and some glue with some fast dry epoxy that I'm going to spray a set epoxy on it. So put the epoxy in place, set it, and it's going to be dry. I got to wait for my little tiny glass, very rare than rare unicorn horn tubes here. And if I read my data sheet properly on these tubes, the plate dissipation, I think that we're going to see about 450, maybe 500 watts. I bet about 500 watts of power with only 20 watts of drive with this box. So let me get this fixed. Let me get the meter glued in place to where I know it's not going to fall out between here and back home. We'll slap the tubes in it, and I think we're ready to run. One more thing, and we're done. Okay, Bo, I give you your JB440. And it does exactly about 440 peak watts, right on the money. The Black Cat. This thing's neat. This meter is real sensitive. It's either just a little bit too much, like click in the corner all the way too much, or just a little bit too little. Not far enough. We got it adjusted. Hello. 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 Hello, audio. Hello, audio. Now it's reading somewhat accurately. It's doing what the watt meter is doing anyhow. So let me put this thing in standby real quick. Got that fan running nice and silent. Now it's moving some real air. When I first turned it on, it was going... It was barely moving any air. But, like I said, took it apart and cleaned it out real good. And way better off now. Let me show the meter board. It's all secured back in place. And the meter's all re-glued. So we don't have to worry about that coming apart. So now what I've done is I got my 2950. And it's going to go through, and that's a 5 watt slug for the input reflect. It's a 1000 watt in PEP, 1000 watt in average, and then we're going to look at that 5 watt slug. Instead of it going in reverse today, I got it going forward. And we're going to work with a 1 watt dead key. Now, normally this radio is like a 50 or 60 watt radio or better, okay? But the reason that I have it turned down so much is because you gotta think of the screwed up, effed up shit this thing's got a key into all the time, right? That, and there's a need to have on your workbench a radio that isn't balls out. So that thing could do a whole lot more bird and make everything I put on a workbench look really freaking cool. But I used that to start out at, and then I've got a bigger and a bigger radio, and then I start adding up amps, and I can drive anything with this current 3 radio configuration. I was explaining this to Scorpion over there at Scorpion CB Radio Repair. He's like, man, didn't that thing put out like only 20 watts? I'm like, yes. Well, you know, you can modify it to make it do more. Yes, sure can. It's not what I need. I need a radio that does about 20 watts. Basically the same thing, 20, 30 watts. Basically these old one school final radios used to do. But I need the ruggedness of a dual final radio. So I back the gate voltage way down, and we back the output of the radio way down. So it can put up with a ton of abuse, and I can use that radio to drive these 1960s, 1970s, early 1980s low drive boxes. If I was to jam 40 or 50 watts of peak into this thing, I'm going to burn up that tube, a little drive tube. And because I'd be putting too much drive into it, it'd show me false input reflect on that meter. That makes sense, you guys? So anyhow, we're going to work with a 1 watt dead key. Here's our peak power. Hello, audio. 20 whole watts. Here's our average power. Hello, audio. Like 7.5, 8 watts. Click that into operate. On, operate, down, standby. Now we're going to key this thing. Hello, audio. Hello, audio. 1 watt dead key gets us nothing for a carrier. Let's see that. Actually, 1 watt dead key gets us about 5 watts worth of carrier, and it swings up to 440 from there. So let's kick this back into standby. So we're going to go up to 2 whole watts worth of carrier now. Turn that into operate, and so I don't destroy my bird meter, we're going to flip that around. 2 watts dead key gets us a 200 watt carrier. Hello, audio. Hello. See that average meter? It's falling back. Turn that around forward. So we're going to roll this back to about 1.5 watts. Nice little solid 1.5 watts carrier. Turn that back to reflect. Operate. Nice 100 watts. Hello audio. It's about 150 bird. Hello audio. Hello. Swinging up to about 450, 460, depending on how loud I modulate into the radio. The first guy that taught me anything about repairing anything was a guy by the name of Mike Cope. He's long gone on to the RF gods. He was one of these 400-pound men that was about 5'2". He lived in a trailer, literally down by the river, had like 15 cats, had wires running all over his property, 15 flipping towers up. He had 50 radios and a tiny little TV in his living room. He showered about once a month. He had long, greasy hair, Coke bottle glasses, and smelled like the armpit of an ass. But that man was smart. Very, very smart. And he was kind, and he was willing to teach. And he even smoked $3 truck stop cigars. You could smell the cigar smell before you even went down the dirt road to get to his house. I mean, the kind of guy that would take his cat box for his cats, walk 4 feet outside his front door and dump it. Gross individual, but smart. Oh my God, so smart. Very kind man, though, and was very willing to try and teach people about radio. And one of the very first things he taught me was, you can't repair shit until you can look at the circuit and read the circuit like a book. The reason I bring this up is because I haven't pursued the radio hobby like a fervor like I have until about the last 10 years. Okay? And that's when I started teaching myself the language of electronics. Now at the age of 40, I finally feel like I'm starting to come close to that, to where I don't need a schematic for damn near anything, and I can just look at this old school tech like this and read it like a book. Got to be able to build the circuit in your head before you can build it with your hands. Good luck finding a schematic for this. Now that I've put the challenge out there, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have some dude within the next week or so shoot me a text. Dude, you're a dumbass. You didn't think to look on this web page. You're right. You're right. Didn't bother to think to look at that web page because I can read the circuit like a book. And you start to look at the underside of this thing. All the circuits are the same for the most part. You're going to have some high voltage. You're going to have some filament. You might have some like voltage controls for like negative voltage for cutoffs. You're going to have a filtering circuit. You're going to have a rectifying circuit. You're going to have some sort of parasitic suppression system. You're going to have, well, on certain stuff, when you get up in tubes, the capacitance of the tube does away with a lot of that. The circuits are generally the same. But I wanted to say to Bo, thank you, one, for sending this amp out and giving me the opportunity to go through it and just be able to figure out what's going on with it. Two, thanks for your kind words on the phone. I greatly appreciate that. And three, gentlemen, this is the Black Cat. Oh, JB 4040. Oh, I shouldn't have said 4040. It made me think of my buddy down by Dock in the Bay. The JB 440. And all things considered, taking into account how cheaply they built these things with the cheap materials, this thing is fairly rust free. It's in really, really good shape. Bo, take good care of it. I've enjoyed getting to work on it. And the other thing I want to show you is this little knob back here. A little knob. It's your input tune. Hello, audio. Hello, audio. Hello, audio. Hello, audio. Hello, audio. We get back here and start twisting this. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, 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 hello. See how your input comes up? Hello, audio, and your output power goes down. I'm going to adjust this down to its flat bow. Hello. 450, almost 500 watts. Audio. Real consistent. I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time tweaking on that knob anymore if I was you. Just saying. Gentlemen, my name is BBI. Without a shadow of a doubt, I'm the biggest mud duck in Idaho. Come check me out on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram. Come to my webpage. You can click on the links. It'll take you right to me. If I remember to add you as a friend, because Facebook has become just a one-way thing where I put things on it and then I got to go back to work because I can't. Man, I look at some of these other guys that are builders and I don't understand how they have that much time to talk on Facebook or any of the other things they do. I don't get it because I'm not the biggest guy in the world, but I don't have enough time to even worry about it. So I don't get it. Send me your friend's request. Eventually you'll get in the door and you can follow along with all the live feed videos and all the other crap that goes on that I use Facebook for. So the other thing is I'm thinking about doing a live event tomorrow on YouTube. For those of you that are going to watch this video all the way to the very end, I think there's going to be an event tomorrow where I do some repairs live on camera on YouTube. It's going to be an interactive session where you can show up and ask me questions. Pretty sure that's going to happen tomorrow. But on that note, if there's anything I can do to help you out, call that number right there. Make sure to click subscribe. The JB440 by Black Cat. The only reason I do this like this is I wrap the video up is because there's not a lot of pictures of this amplifier out there, and if somebody else is looking to use this video as a reference to see how things are wired, this is a pretty good model. So this will give them the opportunity, because I shoot in 4K high definition ultra, that they can pause it and use this as a reference to figure out where the wires go. I'll see you guys. Bye. Before I run away on this little JB440, Bo, aka Yellow Jacket, sent me this. You know, you go buy a Turner today that's now made in China, and you get this shitty little blow molded plastic piece of crap package. He sent me an original Turner microphone. Original. Why a power microphone? It's a Telex Turner, and they discuss all kinds of different stuff back here, which is just amazing, some of the stuff. Conducting a rope experiment in a room, concealing a represent 100% modulation. Adjustment of amplified microphone. I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm like, oh wow, this is really neat. So I go to open the mic, or the box, and it's not a Turner. It's an actual original Road King Telex. Look at this. They don't make them like this anymore. All the ones that I've got here, these are cheap Chinese copies. This is oh no, this is an actual Road King. It's a newer one though. This is an original one back from when I would have been like just a twinkle in my daddy's eye and a thought in my mom's you know what. Turner Road King Special for the RK50, RK50J, and the RK56. It's a complete wiring diagram. Then they give a background history of why the mic was made, and that's neat. Bo, I appreciate this, bud. It's probably never going to see service because I know how valuable this is. It'll probably get a little 4-pin microphone put on it. And it'll end up going up on my shelf of things that I have that are in display in my home, like my entire Sweet 16, or my entire Texas Star collection. And, you know, every radio guy's got to have a mic collection of some kind. But, oh yeah, made with real rubber. RK56. Oh, I feel that button action. I don't know, man. I might actually have to put this to use. Thanks, Bo. Appreciate you, man. This is cool. I gotta go. I'll see you guys. Bye-bye.